and welcome back to Automotive Tales. On today's episode, we are going to try and sort the thermostat issue. So we're going to get the car back in the air, a little bit safer this time, and we're going to take the bottom hose off the radiator, drain the coolant, hopefully get access to the thermostat, which is held in with a circlip, replace all of that, fill up with fresh coolant, and see if we can solve the cold running problem. So let's get the car in the air. Got the car in the air after a bit of an issue with the ramps. However, I spotted a new problem. I don't know whether you can see that on camera, but there's a nice little trickle of smoke coming from the back of the engine. Quite a noticeable, quite a smelly trickle of smoke. Now, I don't know whether the camera will actually zoom in, but you can see just down here, it's actually quite oily. And I did spot this when I was doing the clutch slave and the clutch master. And I just assumed it was a bit of residual oil, but it seems to be fairly fresh. So I think what's happened, while it's been sat for a long time before I've started driving it some miles, the gasket on the rocker cover has dried out. Now, that all is usually all right, except for the fact that on this car, the rocker cover also includes the camshaft. So if you unbolt the rocker cover here, inside here is the camshaft, which drives the distributor straight off the timing belt, which is underneath here. So to change that gasket, that is a top end of the engine off. So that's fun. I'm going to just ignore that, pretend I haven't seen that at all, and it's not smoking at all after 2 minutes of driving, and just carry on with the job in hand. So it's fine. Ignore that. We saw nothing. Okay, so today's job, now we're ignoring the smoking manifold, is to replace the thermostat, which is inside this little housing here down the front of the engine. So what you've got here is the bottom hose and the radiator coming off the side of this housing, and inside there is the thermostat, which is held in with a little circlip. So the first job is to find the other end of that hose, pull the Jubilee clip off, get the coolant out of the system, and then see if we can get that hose off and if we've got enough access to get in here from the top and pull the thermostat. Right, this is going to be fun, I'm sure. So you can just about see the rad hose is off now down here. And you can just see the tip of the thermostat in there. I know it's not focusing very well. So now that hose is out, we've caught most of the coolant, which actually looked in fairly good condition. Some decent quality coolant there, using the lid from a box because, you know, standard. And here is our pipe. So I'm going to carry on with the next bit, mainly because you won't be able to hear me properly because my neighbour is just started mowing the lawn. Right, so that is the thermostat. Hopefully using the camera and get a look in at the circlip. So it does have two tiny holes in for the circlip pliers. Now I've just got to get them located. So typical sod's law, while I have circlip pliers, these don't give you the access you need. So you need them, so they've got a kink on the end. Well, unfortunately, if you're going from underneath, you can't get them into the circlip because that sticks up just a bit too far. And that fouls with the outlet for the pipe, so it fouls on the inside of this bit, and you can't get in from above because they're not long enough to get into the actual circlip without touching the end of that pipe, so they kind of get stuck without touching the circlip. So I'm going to have to get some that are either bent at 45 degrees rather than 90 here, or some straight ones, and hope that with the straight ones there is enough access without touching the cross member, the chassis rail here. So sod's law, it's going to be this one doesn't fit, this one's too long, this one's too big, and it's probably going to be an absolute nightmare to take one circlip out. It seems to be a running theme on this. One bolt on the starter motor made the whole job take 5 times as long, and now the tiniest little circlip is going to stop me from getting the thermostat out. Love old cars, me. Love them. Ta-da! New circular pliers. Right, let's find out if that allows us to get into that space down there which is still dripping with coolant, and get the circlip out. Thermostat out. So this is the old one here. It doesn't actually look terrible, but it is a fairly decent quality one. It's a proper German made Weiler one. So that came out. You can see this has got a seal on the outside of it, which is quite interesting, and then there's like a pressure plate that goes on the front, holds that into the housing, and this is the circlip we have been fighting with. We eventually ended up trying a variety of different tools. This is my original tool. We tried some 45-degree pliers, which my neighbour Chris lent me, and some straight circlip pliers as well, all to no avail. Wasn't enough space to get those in around the chassis rail. This was fouling on the actual thermostat on this little bit here that sticks proud, so that didn't work. The solution ended up to actually be to adjust the tangs on here, so you can see they're not quite at 90 degrees anymore. And that was the trick, is just that tiny little bend on the tangs was enough to allow us to actually get in and pull the circlip out. That was not an easy job, as I'm sure the time-lapse will show. So, new parts-wise, we have a nice new thermostat, which is also a German-made Weiler unit. Both are an 83 degrees setting, so hopefully the engine should actually get to that temperature rather than it being permanently open, which is what it seemed to be before. Now, there's a different sealing arrangement. These come with a tiny little seal that goes on the back of here, which is correct as per the Haynes manual and all the different guides I've looked at, which is just held in location at the back of the thermostat there by the slight lip on the pressing. It doesn't seem quite as neat a setup as this. This fits really neatly with this little rubber seal into the sort of housing, and that was evident because when we pulled this out, all the rest of the coolant came out that was sitting behind it. So while it was dripping away and leaking away through whatever was causing it to not shut properly, it was still fairly well sealed. So we also have a new spring clip, because I wasn't sure if I'd end up damaging this getting it out, and with how frustrating it was, I was getting to the point of being tempted to try and cut it out. Not that it would have worked, but it would have made me feel better. So we're going to have to clean the pressure plate up. We're going to probably just use the new circlip because we've got it. Maybe keep this as a spare for some time in the future. And then we're going to try and put it back in with the proper original seal it should have, which is this here. I do actually have a spare one of those in case I damaged it, because now I've got it in pieces, I don't want to get stuck waiting for parts. But I am curious as to how well it'll work compared to this seal, which looks like a better design because it properly wraps around the thermostat. So I'm going to finish my cup of tea, and then we're going to put this back together. So, as you can see, the thermostat is back in place. I'm just going to use the camera to check the ring is seated. So, okay, you can see at the top there, it doesn't look like it's fully gone home, even though it does at the bottom. However, I've got the circlip in a much easier location to get to. So the prongs go in now at the kind of, what was that, 7 o'clock, rather than as they were around at the 2 o'clock, which made it very difficult to access. So it looks like I need to bring the pliers back in and just push this top side up here at sort of 1, 2 o'clock back into location. Right, here we go. So let's have a look, see. It looks like it's still not quite home. Right, I best check the other circlip and just make sure, because it is a bit thicker on one side. It's a bit difficult to see the camera while it's buried down in the engine bay. Okay, that looks like it's seated a little bit better. So now we can actually get on with putting the pipe back on. So while we're under here putting the hose back on, which is this fella just here, I thought we'd have a go at just tensioning the power steering pump. So we did get a bit of a squeal on warm starts, which I think because the belt was a bit slack. So you can see the little adjuster here. So you just loosen off the bolts either side, move the adjuster in the middle, which extends this threaded section, tighten the bolts back up. So we've done that, we've had a little go at it. We've got a much tighter belt there. You could almost turn the belt 180 before, so that's looking a lot better. I'm just going to give it a bit of a clean to make sure there's no WD-40 or oil or grease or crap on it. And then it's time to put the under tray back on under here, tighten up the Jubilee clips here on the pipe in such a way you can actually get at them, because they're always tucked away in an awkward position. And then start to refill it with coolant. So, multiple jobs in one. That's the first job is to run the engine up to temperature, bleed the system through the little 12mm nut on there, and check the levels. It looks like it's just dropped about to the minimum. It's a bit hard to see on the bottle here, so I'll wait till it cools down and see if it comes back up to the maximum after it runs temperature. But so far so good. We have let the engine come up to temperature. It got just to the warm point here, and the fan has kicked in and brought it right back down. It seems to be fairly stable in this bracket, which is good. It was doing that before, but it was getting a little bit colder as you're driving along. So the real test will be when I drive it to work tomorrow to see whether it stays in the right band or whether it gets really cold once it's driving. You can see the fan's kicked in because the voltage has dropped right down. Yeah, all seems all right so far. There you go, fan's just gone off. See if the temperature comes back up again. It will creep up very, very slowly, I suspect. Okay, well hopefully you can hear me over the wind today because it's quite noisy out here, but I'm in the process of trying to get this little seal out from around the lock. As you can see, it's really badly perished. I've actually just been picking at it with my fingers and it's been completely falling apart. I decided it was probably easier to try and get it out that way than try and get all of these gubbings apart and get it out from the inside, but we'll soon see whether that comes to haunt me and whether it would have been easier just to take everything apart. As you may have noticed, I have been whittling a piece of wood because I'm not at the workshop, so I don't have all my normal tools for doing trim removal, and I don't wish to scratch the paintwork. So rather than prying at it with a screwdriver, which is the kind of default choice, I thought a piece of wood is less likely to damage. So I'm going to carry on picking this out and see if we can push the new seal in, if I can get all these bits out. Should be a simple little job, but it'd make a nice little difference to the back of the car. Okay, well, that is the remnants of the old seal. I ended up having to use a screwdriver just to section it. I got as much out as I could with the little wooden piece, and then it actually came out from underneath all the gubbings. So now it's time to try and push fit the new one in. Wish me luck.